Welcome to the Crest Network. This is Scott Darby, the production consultant for Crest Network. I'm also the president and CEO of Disaster Equipment Rental. As your production consultant, you can feel free to call me anytime for consultation on any projects that you have questions on. Today's topic is mobilizing for large loss. We want to talk about the risk and rewards of mobilization. Some companies like to mobilize to storm events before the storm hits to be able to get there and get dug in so they're there when the damage starts to occur. Still other companies like to wait to the end of the storm and go in just as the storm ends. Some companies also like to wait 5, 6, 7 days after the storm till roads are open and services are restored to the general area before going in. Either way works. You just have to have a plan and make a choice of which way that you would like to respond in the event of a storm that you're going through, such as a hurricane or a flood event. Other than that, on single large loss jobs or single jobs of medium size, the first thing that will happen obviously is answering the phone. When you answer the phone, you want to ask the proper questions to get the information that you need to be able to mobilize. A little bit different from a regular size loss because you often have to carry more people and more supplies and more equipment than you would need to carry to a regular size loss. So sometimes you want to ask a little bit more detailed questions to be sure that you're carrying everything that you need. Of course, you need the job location, you need loss details, maybe when the loss occurred, the source of the loss, and the area affected. Ask if there was a fire loss, water loss, maybe a mold loss, and what you will be doing there. Maybe find out if it's insurance pilot or private pay. If there's a deposit that you need to pick up when you get there, or if that's something you're going to discuss once you get on site. Either way you want to do it's fine. Just make sure that you have a set way of doing it and that you follow that way of doing it each time. The main thing you want to do in the initial phone call is to be able to discuss your time of arrival. You don't want the customer to have the expectation that you're going to be there at 6 o'clock and you not show up to 10. It automatically starts the ball off on the wrong side of the court to do that. So have that established, have your time of arrival established. Try to give a window in your time of arrival. One of my favorite sayings is that if you call me in the morning, I'll be there before you go to sleep. If you call me in the late afternoon, I'll be there before you wake up. Gives yourself a little bit of a broad range of time of arrival in case you run into unexpected problems. Do you do a mobilization contract? Some companies do a strict mobilization contract where they have a written contract and they have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. It's good, bad, and indifferent depending on the way that you do it. The good part about it is anytime you have a good contract, you have a good understanding and it's in writing. Sometimes you cannot get a mobilization contract that is as tight as you'd like it to be because you don't really know what equipment you're going to need, you don't know how many people you're going to need, etc. And sometimes when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, it's just a little bit indifferent. If you're going to do a very large loss, I don't think we want to start off at the large loss worrying too awful much about how much the mobilization is going to cost. So figure out the way you're going to do that and go accordingly. Keep as much written communication as possible, particularly in the beginning with your mobilization contracts. You can email or text people or screenshot that later documentation. Most communication during the beginning stages, however, will be spoken communication. Simply follow that up with an email or text to ensure the understanding. Just repeat the context of the conversation of the important parts and say, this is my understanding of our mobilization agreement. If I misunderstood anything, feel free to let me know. Just keep in mind, if it wasn't written and documented, you have no way to prove it. It's no way to get it done. So keep that communication lines open as you're traveling down the road or in the air to get to the job site. Just keep in constant contact until your first people arrive. Now that you have an understanding of the expectation of when you'll be there, you'll want to get on site fairly quickly, and you need to know what your plan of action is. So just as soon as you have the contract and documentation over, start writing your plan of action. And please write that down. Don't try to wing it. Don't try to put it in your head, because you'll wind up forgetting something. So start writing a plan of action for mobilization and what to do to get all the personnel that you need on site. Decide early on who's responsible for each duty that's going to have to be performed on the job site. Call any support teams you need, such as industrial hygienists, people to test for asbestos, lead-based paint, or mold, equipment suppliers, security guards. The support team list just goes on and on. This should be a list that you already have made out and already have agreements made with different teams on how to come in and how quickly to deploy. Then you need to decide on your mode of transportation for each team and start preparing for equipment arrival. For your management team, your mode of transportation needs to be fairly quick. So if the job's a decent way away, you may want to consider flying by the quickest means possible, which may or may not include private airfare. That seems excessive on some jobs, but again, remember the risk and the rewards that you have. You're risking the cost of a private air flight versus risking not being able to perform the job in an orderly fashion, or maybe someone else getting there and taking the job before you arrive. So don't fret too much about it up front, and it's something that you usually can get into the bill at a later time. I think it is very important that you get the management team on site as quickly as possible so they can make good decisions on how much more equipment you need to send than maybe you have already on the road, how many more people, or maybe even who to turn back if you've got too much equipment on the way. Another mode of transportation would be semi-trucks. The large equipment that you use, obviously, the larger the truck, the more you can carry on one truck. So have semi-trucks lined up and have them ready to go. Again, something that you'll want to do in advance so you can mobilize quickly. It's very hard to get a trucking company that you've not had a previous agreement with to mobilize on the spur of the moment. Most of these companies will have their schedules 2 to 3 days out, if not 2 to 3 weeks out. They're not used to getting calls that say, I need something moved right now. However, that does happen, so if you're ready for it, you'll be a lot better prepared and a lot more able to get your equipment there in a timely manner. They call that expedited dedicated freight. Expedited meaning they're going to do it immediately. Dedicated means you're the only load on their truck. So that does cost a little bit more money, so be prepared for that. Other modes of commercial transportation would be that's normally used as pickup trucks or one-ton trucks. There's 2 or 3 numbers we're going to talk about today that will keep you from getting in trouble, that may stop you from getting to your project on time. You want to make sure you don't fall into that trap. The first number is 10,100 GVWR. GVWR stands for gross vehicle weight rating. And that is what is put on by the manufacturer to say how much that vehicle can safely carry. The second GVWR number that you want to be aware of is 12,000 pounds. And we'll talk about the significance of that a little bit later. The third number that you want to be aware of is 26,000 pounds GVWR. So those are the main three numbers that are important. Are you legal? The worst thing that can happen to you on the way to the site is to get pulled over by the Department of Transportation or the Highway Patrol and told to stop your vehicle and not move it because you or the vehicle that you're in is not legal. This can happen on the roadside, and unlike private passenger vehicles, they need no reason to pull you over. They simply can pull you over for what is called a roadside check to see if you are legal and if you're overweight or underweight or within the bounds of limits of the weight for that particular road or for the truck that you're driving. You can be grounded as many as 24 to 36 hours, depending upon the violation that you have and what's going on. So unless you want your equipment to show up late, you want to try to make sure you're legal. So we're going to go over a few more things with you that will try to help you stay legal during the mobilization process. To find your GVWR, look below the nadir pin on the driver's door of the vehicle. When you look below that, it'll have a bunch of numbers on there, but you're looking for the GVWR. And sometimes they'll have a total number. Sometimes they'll have the front axle and the rear axle, and you'll actually have to add those two together. So you've got to get what your total GVWR is to know what you're legal to do. Any vehicle with a GVWR over 10,100 that I mentioned on the slide before, you need a medical card to be able to drive that vehicle. That's all day, every day. That's if you're not even hooked to a trailer. So a 3/4 ton truck in most instances will be more than 10,100. A 1 ton truck in all instances will be over 10,100. So if you're furthering commerce, which means working, and you're in that truck, then you have to have a medical card to drive that vehicle. If you're going to the movies or the grocery store in that truck and you're not furthering commerce, then you're exempt from that rule. So be sure about that and to know what your GVWR is. If you're pulling a gooseneck trailer with dual wheels, I'll refer back to the magic number of 12,000 GVWR that I spoke about in the last picture. But a dual wheel gooseneck trailer with dual wheels and tandem axles has a GVWR of 20,000 pounds. You cannot pull this trailer with any type of pickup truck without being over the limit of the 26,000 pounds. Because you have to add the GVWR of the vehicle and the GVWR of the trailer. So to pull a trailer such as this gooseneck trailer with dual wheels and tandem axles, you would need a Class A CDL to drive that. You'd also have to have a medical card before you can get a Class A CDL. Let's go to smaller trailers and talk about those. If you have a twin axle trailer with the 7 lugs on each wheel, that trailer is rated at 14,000 pounds. So let's say, for example, that you're pulling that with a 1-ton truck with a GVWR of 12,400 or 12,500 pounds, which most of them are, then you're going to be 400 to 500 pounds over the magic number of 26,001 pound. Once you reach 26,001 pound, you now go into the category of needing a Class A CDL for a combination vehicle. So you don't want to get out on the road and find out that the GVRW of these GVWR of these vehicles are over the limit, and then you get grounded and you're not unable to proceed to the job site. The actual weight of the truck and the trailer does not matter. In fact, you can be empty and still need a CDL depending on what the gross vehicle weight rating is. There is a Class B CDL. A lot of people get that confused with smaller vehicles under a trailer truck. That is not correct. The Class B CDL is for a straight truck, as the state or the federal government refers to it. In other words, a box truck or a flatbed truck that does not swivel in the middle. Now, if you have a straight truck, you can get a Class B CDL to drive that truck, and you would not need a Class A. A Class A is for a combination vehicle, that being the combination of the truck and the trailer. When you get ready to get a CDL, the first thing you'll need to do is get a medical card. The second thing you need to do is go to the DMV and take a commercial driver's license written test. If you're successful in passing that test, you will obtain a learner's permit. Once you have that learner's permit, there's a time period that you have to train and get proficient in the vehicle. Then you'll go back and take a pre-trip inspection test, which is a practical test to where you have to demonstrate the skills that you know how to inspect the truck, to make sure it is safe, and to know how to do minor repairs if the vehicle is not safe for inspections. But at any route, you have to know if it's safe so you know how to have repairs done before you leave. Once you pass that test, then you do a driving test, which is physically driving the vehicle around, most of the time some city streets with some fairly tight turns, and then coming back to the DMV and backing between cones and parallel parking or straight backing or turning, whatever that the examiner may ask you to do. And once you finish that, then you now have a legal CDL. To have a CDL, again, you have to have a medical certificate. This is a sample of a medical certificate here. Medical certificates normally last 2 years. However, if you have some medical problems, such as high blood pressure or obesity or some other type of medical problem, the medical examiner may choose to only give you a certificate for 1 year or maybe even less until they can work on the condition that you have. So it's not an automatic that you get one for 2 years each and every time. This tag is a 26,000 pound state tag. This tag is legal to run in the state, and as long as it is 26,000 pounds or less, it is also legal to run in all 48 lower states, or even the other two if you can get it there. But it is legal to run into those states as long as it's 26,000 pounds or less. If you weigh over 26,000, or if the GVWR of the truck and the GVWR of the trailer added together is over 26,000, then that vehicle becomes illegal to run. If you're running interstate, which is like the interstates around the nation, then you need to be legal to be able to run in different states. If you're running intrastate, which means you're only running in that state, then you can actually get this tag larger than 26,000 pounds. You're just not legal to cross state lines with it. Once you get ready to cross state lines with a load of 26,001 pounds or more, then you need an apportioned tag. The apportioned tag simply means that you will need to turn in a report to the federal government each quarter of how many miles, or each year for the tag purposes, of how many miles you have run in each state that you've run that vehicle in. and then they will apportion the amount of taxes that you paid to the given state that you've run the most in. If you're running over 54,000 pounds, you will also be required to have a heavy highway tax and have an IFTA sticker. IFTA stands for International Fuel Tax Agreement. That is pretty much the same way of the portion tag, where they take the amount of the tax you pay for that and divide it among the states you drive in. The IFTAs for the fuel, so they take the amount of fuel that you buy, they look at where you buy your fuel and which state you buy your fuel in, and then they divide that tax from that fuel money up between those states that you actually ran in. Another thing that you want to be careful of with larger vehicles are parkway and or tunnel restrictions. A lot of parkways do not allow trucks or commercial vehicles at all on the parkway. A lot of them have low tunnels or low bridges that you have to watch out for. Most all cities, if you're carrying a hazardous material such as propane, you must go around the city and not through the city with that load of propane. So just know the laws, know the rules and the regulations, and make sure you don't get grounded and they're sitting on the side of the road while somebody else is traveling to your job site. Another thing the federal government requires is a daily log for the drivers. This is done to make sure that the driver does not run more hours than is legally safe. A driver in normal conditions can drive only 11 hours and work only 14 hours per 24-hour period. Anything above that would be illegal. There are some exemptions for this, such as if you're getting to your home base of operation within a couple of hours, every now and then you can stretch that out to 13 hours. There's also an exemption called the 100-mile rule. If you're 100 nautical miles from your base of operation, then you don't have to fill out a driver's daily log. You do have to keep a record of hours of service at your office, so if they were to audit you, they can come back and find out how many hours that you're working. When you run into storms and or hurricane areas out of town, and you set up a base of operation there, you can count that also as your base of operation and start your 100-mile rule from that point on. So when you're delivering amounts of equipment, you don't have to stop and fill out logs every time you make a delivery when you're in the hurricane area. So another little thing to keep in mind, if your driver is driving that truck that is required to be CDL more than 10 days a month, then you may be required to run an electronic log instead of a paper log like the one in the file. An electronic log is installed by several different companies, but it actually draws the driving log and your brakes and your off-time logs and which driver is driving the truck automatically for you, and keeps it stored in a computer in your truck, and it keeps the driver from having to do that. Some people are exempt from that, and some people need to use it. Another thing that you will need anytime you are running a commercial vehicle is a straight bill of lading saying what the loads are, what's in your load. They want to know what you're carrying, what you're hauling, how much you're hauling, and the weight of what you're hauling. This needs to be within the reach of the driver. The purpose being for this, if you're stopped by the highway patrol or you are at a weigh station and they're doing an inspection, or Should you have a fire and the fire department come up, they want to know what you're hauling, or maybe they have to tow your vehicle for some reason. They want to know what's on the vehicle so they know for the safety of the vehicle. As you can see at the bottom of this straight bill of lading, it has one cylinder of UN 1075 liquefied petroleum gas. It has 800 pounds of that. Liquefied petroleum gas, referred to as LPG, or further referred to as propane. We carry that a lot in the restoration industry to run dryers that run on propane heat. That's going to be humidifiers or some sort of heaters. So you need to make sure you have that line item correct. Over there where it says weight of the liquefied petroleum gas, it says 800 pounds. It's another magic number there of 1,400. The DOT laws and the pipeline security laws say that you can haul 1,400 pounds or less of LPG, including the container, without having to be placarded or without having to have a hazardous material Department of Transportation number on the side of your truck. Now, the tank itself still has to be placarded, no matter the size of it, but the vehicle itself does not have to be placarded. You don't have to have a DOT number, and your driver does not have to have a hazmat endorsement if you're 1,400 pounds or less. There are some exclusions, exemptions, or ways around the law, whichever you look at it. But if your propane tanks are part of the machine that you're hauling or that you have loaded, then you are exempt from that rule. So if you had propane tanks mounted to the equipment, the propane was hard plumbed in and actually part of the machine as declared by the DOT, then you might can get around that law. I would have that inspected by the Department of Transportation before I try for that exemption, because fines for hauling 1,401 or more pounds illegally start at $50,000 each. So that's not something that you really want to get caught up in on hauling when you get into propane. Another thing about this document is if you're carrying small tools and other equipment, then that would need to be listed too, with the approximate weight of those small tools and equipment that you've got on there. You need, as you see in the top right-hand corner, the shipper's number, the carrier's number, whatever. The carrier is the trucking company that's pulling it. If you own that truck, then you would be the carrier, and you may also be the shipper. The shipper is responsible for providing this document. The shipper has to have one with their dispatch, which has to be a 24-hour dispatch. In other words, you got to answer your phone when they call, and you need a copy of this with the dispatch, and then the driver needs a copy of this form with them in the vehicle at all times. Also, it is not uncommon for the insurance consultants to want to look at this form and to make sure that the charges are appropriate that you are charging them. So they would want to look at the form, see who the trucking company is, see how much weight it is, and see how much it's charged. Keep in mind when you're giving people estimated times of arrival, things that are out of your control. Have you lined up trucking companies in advance? If you haven't, it's going to be extremely hard to get a truck in a timely manner. Keep in mind snow, flooded roads, and debris, etc. You can take a 2-hour trip, but have to make 10 detours trying to get around the flooded area, and you're going to be late when you get there. The only thing you can really do about that is to try and to stay in touch with your customer. Number one, if they're already in the area, then they can give you some heads up on which roads are not flooded or which roads are not blocked by snow, and then they can help you get into that area. debris when you're going into hurricanes and tornado areas. Debris will be blocking the road. You'll need to make sure to carry spare tires on these vehicles when going into that type of area, because you'll have a lot of flats. Are the trucking companies that you're calling willing to take on these challenges? The answer to that is yes, but will it cost more? The answer to that is yes, it will. Two reasons for that. They know of the hazards that's in there on a regular 5-hour trip for them, maybe 10. 10 hours. They also know when they get into that area that they're not going to be able to get a load to come back out of that area. So they're going to charge enough to compensate both the driver and the truck to go to your job site and to get out of that area where they can get another load. Because nobody's shipping anything out of a tornado or hurricane area. So sometimes you'll have to pay as much as 2 or 3 times that amount to get it in. That's normal. Adjusters adjust, and adjusters and consultants fuss. So sometimes they fuss about the amount that it costs, but as long as you've got your invoice backing that up, and maybe a small explanation under the line item of why it was more expensive, then you shouldn't have a problem with that. So why do you care if it's more expensive at that time? You shouldn't. Your main concern should be getting your equipment to the job site so you can get started on your job. Last but not least, you need to prepare for equipment arrival. Things to keep in mind on equipment arrival is safety and hazards. Do you have down wires near the job site? Do you have broken gas mains? Do you have roads that have been washed away during the floods? So take all that in mind. Also, with equipment placement, take safety and hazards in mind. Again, while you're going through parking lots with wires there, they're not normally as high as they are when you're out on the highway. You have to be careful not to block fire exits, fire codes, not to block doorways that are exits. So several things you want to do. The last thing you want to do is have your trucking company dolly the trailer down where you think you're going to use it at, and then to find out 12 hours after the truck is left that you got to move it forward about 150 feet, and you have no truck there to move it forward. So your management team that flew in ahead of you, whether they flew in or drove smaller vehicles in, should make sure that that's one of the things they have on their checklist to get checked out, and to make sure that they have the answer to those questions before the equipment arrives. Equipment arrival should usually occur 12 to 24 hours after the management team gets there. So you've got plenty of time to get that kind of stuff figured out. You have to have room for fuel trucks and maintenance to get in to the equipment if you're running generators, electrical equipment, dehumidifiers, etc. Once those things start to run out of fuel, you've got to be able to get your truck up to it, to get your fuel to it. You've got to be able to have enough room to get around it and maintenance it. So don't crowd it so close together that you can't do that. There's different city and state regulation regarding fuel and also regarding equipment placement. Some examples: Miami Beach, Florida. You can't run a generator without a permit. So before you set a generator there, you need a permit. If you don't, in that particular instance, at least a few years ago, the fine was $30. So we just took a $30 a day ticket and put it on the bill as permitting, because we got there on a Friday evening, wasn't any way to get a permit for Monday. Jersey City, New Jersey. You can't block a sidewalk or a road or an alley without a permit. The fines there are really hefty, and if you get there after business hours, simply talk to the police department and they'll work it out with you, but you just can't do it. And on Manhattan Island, and also within the inner loop of Houston, Texas, you can't have any propane. The fines there are The fines are not that bad, but the regulations require to have a full fire brigade with a fire engine there while the propane is inside the city. And of course, you have to pay for that. So it can get up to about $10,000 a day to have to pay for that to be there 24 hours a day. So know your local rules, know your state rules. If you don't know them, when you get into town and your management team gets in there, have a checklist and go through that and make sure that you don't get yourself in trouble. So that goes for road and lane closures. If you get into an area, particularly of hilly terrain, you may come in off of the street perfectly straight and level, thinking you're parking on concrete on top of dirt. But when you go around to the back, you may discover that the back entrance is a parking garage, and you're actually parking an 80,000-pound truck on top of a parking garage. That normally does not work and would cause a collapse. So before you pull a truck into a parking area off of the side of the street, your driver or your managers that got there before everybody else does need to walk completely around it and make sure that they're not parking on top of parking garages or tunnels that could risk collapse. And those are some of the things that you need to do to make sure that you have a safe arrival on the scene with equipment arrival. Again, I am Scott Tarpley. I'm the consultant for the Crest Network. Anytime you need me, feel free to give me a call. Our next seminar will be, my next seminar on Crest will be for equipment arrival and placement and setup at the scene. So I am Scott Tarpley. Have a good Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you.